Hi, everybody. Welcome to our presentation titled Partnering with HR to Build a Culture of Cybersecurity. While this part of the talk is recorded, we're both online and we're looking forward to your questions and comments throughout our presentation. And we appreciate you being here today. Has anyone ever seen or received an email like this? If we were in person, I am certain I would see hands going up, heads shaking, plenty of you having seen these before. And if nothing else, I know from all the vendor reports and things that we all see that this is prevalent. It's happening all the time. It's an issue that we're all dealing with. And it's probably safe to say that those of you who have dealt with this, either because you've received this email or you've had it reported to you, we've all shared similar feelings of dread, anger, sadness, careers flashing before our eyes potentially, especially if you look at this email and you notice who this email is from. That's my name in the sender block, and that's my name down at the bottom in the signature block. It's my name, but I didn't send this email. But my HR team received this email, and they were asked to change the routing number and the checking account number for my paycheck. And while this may sound like a CISO telling you another story of woe about the phishing email that I had to deal with, it's not. Our talk today is a story about human resources, not the function of HR, but the people that we all have in our companies and organizations that we deal with. We made this presentation for small to medium-sized businesses. We made it for the security folks, whether it's the CISO, the IT director, anyone that's overseeing the security program, but we also focused it on folks who are dealing with limitations, limited resources, whether it's the number of people on your team, the budget, the time available to do all the things that you want to do with security, or we've also made it for an audience of anyone who wants to be involved with supporting your company's security efforts, because we know those are important.
So we want you to learn from this situation, not just observe what happened, but understand what we did to recover from this situation. We want you to walk away with some ideas on how to get started developing a culture of cybersecurity through transforming the mindset of employees around cyber and getting you to think about how to implement the process for your business. Most importantly, we want to help you avoid a near miss like we experienced or worse. I am Valerie Utsi, and I have over 20 years of experience in HR. In that 20 years, I've led various size teams and have been in all size companies. I've also had the opportunity to lead organizational change throughout that experience, particularly where it comes to instituting or enhancing corporate culture.
And my name's Steve Lazinski. I've spent my career in the military and now in information security. And similar to Valerie, I've been a part of teams of all sizes and organizations of all different types. I've also dealt with culture, especially institutional culture in the military. And one reminder as we're talking today that both Valerie and I are here in our personal capacity. We're not speaking on behalf of our current employers, and these are our opinions only. So based on the email that I showed you at the very beginning, let's go back a year prior to when that email came into the company where I was working at the time, so that you can understand the significance of the email and what I had been doing up to that point. I was hired, it was by a well-established company. It had been around for 20 years. They had good security practices in place. The basics were there, especially with the technology and how it was being implemented. But what wasn't fully developed was a security program, one that involved good interaction and relationship with the employees, where they understood their role and the importance that they played in security for the entire company. And my mandate when I was brought in was to get a security program in place and quickly, because we were going through a very high growth period. And as a contractor, we had a number of very high visibility, critical contracts that we were responsible for. So right after I started, as I was getting the lay of the land and what was going on, I had learned that there was an incident before I got there. And in this incident, it was an email that looked like it came from the CEO asking for all of the employee social security numbers, and it had to be done in a hurry. Luckily, a very sharp employee saw this, questioned what was going on, and didn't send the email, and it was stopped. So that was the good news. But nothing else came from it. Nobody talked about it. No lessons were shared. Nobody knew what else happened. It just quietly went away. So I was coming in as this company's first CISO. Not only was I their first CISO, but this was my first time being a CISO. And that's what it felt like on my first day, in my nice shiny new suit and tie, going off almost like my first day of school, taking on this new role and this new challenge. And so I started in my process of creating a security program, reviewing the documentation, talking to the CIO, to the IT team, learning about the corporate strategy and objectives. And that way it helped me build a multi-year, multifaceted information security strategy. And I viewed employees in that strategy as an asset, not a liability. They were something that I could use to help out my security efforts. And security awareness training was a key part of that. It was one of my early priorities. So as I built my team and I worked with the IT team, we did very simple things starting off: security awareness posters. I started a series of brown bags to bring people in, be able to talk about security. Of course, it didn't hurt that I offered free lunches so that they were interested and they wanted to be there and listen to me talk. But the most significant change that I put in place right off the bat was moving from an annual security training awareness program to a monthly security awareness training program. And that came from, I had just done the onboarding, the initial 60-minute required cybersecurity training. And I endured the training, and I mean endured that training. It was very basic, very simple. It was not very engaging. So by changing to monthly training, what we ended up doing was simple 3 to 5 minute sessions through a training platform, quizzes, videos, things that were more engaging for the employees. And that ended up being the equivalent of 60 minutes a year. And these were things I asked of the employees, and I asked the supervisors to support this request, to move quickly, to just get people doing these things, to get it as part of their habit. And I did that also understanding that I couldn't directly order everyone to do these things. I had to influence. So I tried to do a balancing act between a carrot and a stick type of approach. As you can imagine, things had different various outcomes, right? Some employees were happy to do it. Others were reluctant. Supervisors felt like it was an added burden on their already busy teams. My direct bosses, they thought it was great. They actually wish I would have gone faster and bit a little bit more on the stick side of things because of the importance of the contracts that we were overseeing. So things got off to an okay start. It wasn't super smooth. It wasn't as fast as I wanted, but things worked well enough.
So Steve and I noticed that we had a lot in common and quickly built a friendship and partnership. Pre-pandemic, Steve and I enjoyed taking a few minutes to leave the office and sit down for a coffee talk. These coffee talk conversations gave us a great opportunity to see each other's department activities from a different viewpoint. I sat in many meetings with Steve, watching him explain his next steps in his cyber awareness rollout, and I used our coffee talks to discuss ways to modify his approach and introduce culture to his program. So I was watching activities that Steve was doing and saw him tackling this cyber awareness program from a process mindset. It was systematic and organized. I need to get the employees to do these 5 things. However, many employees were responding the same way they do anything that's new and takes them away from their day-to-day duties. Cyber awareness was this unimportant thing that an executive was pushing. It's not going to help me do my job or get me promoted. And this process mindset comes out as just one more thing, as Steve had mentioned earlier, in terms of the supervisor and employee experience. And they were totally missing the point of the importance of the program and making it just an IT problem versus being cybersecurity and all employee problem. And this is where I realized Steve might learn from my experience developing corporate culture. Thinking about this from a resilience perspective, Steve needed to use the strong culture around him to support his efforts. He needed the lively, engaging conversations about cybersecurity to continue when he wasn't around or when he wasn't bringing it up regularly. This change would yield him better progress, moving away from cyber as a process to getting cyber embedded as part of the company culture, making cybersecurity a priority for all employees. I know it's spring and it's warm out, but I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and it's not unheard of to see snow this late in the year. So I use this analogy here of the snowplow. Steve was going at his cyber awareness training all alone, chipping away at his problem. It felt like he was plowing through the organization with this new initiative. And I want to clarify, not in a bad way in terms of bad social skills or leaving dead bodies in his path, but from the perspective, he had this heavy and unsteady thing he was trying to move quickly by himself. Steve had not thought about it as an effort that could be shared more widely as a joint initiative. Something needed to be done to get the level of effectiveness that he needed faster and with more success. So with that analogy in mind, this is what I envisioned when I thought of using culture. A group making more progress quicker and over a wider area because they were working together. Regardless of the size of the company, look to people you can partner with to support your cause. While in our example, the snowplow chain started with Steve adding HR, you can look to partner with other influential people within your organization to help you build your snowplow team. Partnering with human resources could create a fast track to engaging with all employees at multiple touch points. So that then begs the question, what does culture mean? It is common to see the human resource leader talk about culture from the perspective of how we treat each other or communicate across the organization. While those are important aspects of culture, today I want to walk you through 3 key components of culture, and I will share examples of how your cybersecurity culture can be built. The first one is core. Core reflects established norms within the company and how employees behave, who we are and how we make decisions or treat one another. Every company has a core. It shows up slightly different at each company. Some view it as your North Star or your guardrails. Each company will have a core that's unique to that company based on industry or customer location or other factors. The second one is natural. Natural reflects the things that we do automatically without thinking. I'll give you 2 funny examples, dolphins swimming in a pack or birds building nests. They just do it automatically. At work, it shows up how we operate. We know to treat each other with respect or always display a high level of customer service. It's the behavioral norms that your company has adopted and people operate within without thinking twice. Lastly is accountable. This one is very critical. This is where you see transformation take place. It's not just how we do things, it's also how we hold each other responsible within the organization. It levels the playing field we are all on. When others begin to hold their colleagues accountable, they begin to turn activities or actions into expected behaviors or norms that everyone in the company is expected to display. This level of responsibility or accountability transforms your role, and you are no longer the lone snowplow. You are building your snowplow team. The last thing I want to point you to is that intersection of core, natural, and accountability where all 3 meet. This is where culture is formed. A company needs all 3, and every employee must buy into it and live it, or culture will not form or it will fail. As I mentioned before, I've worked to build new cultures and reinforce current cultures on a number of occasions. And from what I've seen, there's no need to start from scratch. We all have examples of our corporate culture. Some are more mature than others, but it's likely you have something to build on already. In our case, we had a culture initiative I was leading and was able to incorporate cybersecurity into it. We also leverage CMMI since it instills policies and processes and measures into the things we did each day. Some of you may be familiar with the process improvement model within CMMI. There are other examples like Six Sigma that your company may be using or things that better fit your environment. It is best to use something that the employees are already familiar with, as the process and terms will be familiar to them, and the employees will easily see connections versus, again, that kind of standalone cyber initiative.
It wasn't hard for Valerie to convince me that changes were needed and I should consider a different approach to getting employees engaged on their own cybersecurity in support of my efforts. And with her help, we looked at how cybersecurity aligned to our culture norms that were already established and growing. Since we were a tech company and it was very easy and the aptitude was already there to think about them in those particular ways. So after putting some thought into Valerie's idea to apply culture to my security efforts, I came to the realization that I needed to build beyond informal and unstructured approaches. And in CMMI language, I would have considered them initial to managed. And instead, I needed to change towards a formal, structured approach. And again, in CMMI language, thinking of them, how do I get them to be defined or even quantitatively managed? So one of the first things I did is, instead of just encouraging training, I went ahead and moved it into policy. So it became required to do the training I was asking each month. That way it was codified in policy. Employees understood its importance. The beauty was Valerie owned that training policy, so it was very easy to work with her to make that happen. This helped employees understand not just the fact that it was now a requirement, but it was something that was going to be, it's in policy, it's going to be tracked, and it's going to be discussed at the annual performance reviews.
I noticed that Steve was very comfortable public speaking at our company all hands and department meetings, and I encouraged him to continue being the face of security by also presenting at the new hire orientation program, and not just providing the slides and guidance to the HR team who would normally present this topic. This enabled him to meet each employee and demonstrate how serious the company was about security, since the CISO was here talking to them specifically about this program. Day one, employees were introduced to the items most important to the company, with cyber being one of them. Even virtually, we adjusted our orientation program and still had the CISO present. As part of the orientation, he explained the why we do what we do. And this is an important step into building cyber into your culture. Once employees understand the why, it helps them to see the importance. In addition, giving cyber a face is important to your cause. Employees respond better when they know the person behind the cyber imperatives. I was also able to help Steve move from general executive support, where in meetings they agreed to his plans, to overt examples that demonstrated the executive support behind his efforts. One of those examples was incorporated into our corporate philanthropy, and we brought in cybersecurity into that initiative. Corporate philanthropy was a key concept within the existing culture at the company. To reflect that corporate value of cybersecurity, I was able to use my role in efforts to sponsor underserved youth to attend a local information security conference called B-Sides DC, for those of you who may be from the DC area or familiar with that conference. This sponsorship was important to share with employees to reflect the connection with corporate philanthropy and cyber, which reflects natural behaviors. It was easy for me to join Steve's Lunch and Learn event, since he usually provided a great lunch for us. Of course, my team quickly learned to make these a priority since I was there, and I could see other leaders and their teams were starting to do the same. Did I tell you about my favorite event, the one where we had a great barbecue and I won Security Jeopardy? As the keeper of the company swag, I suggested Steve use them as prizes to attract more employees to his quarterly Lunch and Learn events. Steve was able to create an environment where talking about cyber was fun and cool for all. This more important part is that the fun events translated into the employees talking about cyber and experiences that they have that could have been detrimental cyber events. That level of staff awareness will help you create your cybersecurity culture environment, where employees not only understand the importance, but they also practice it in their everyday work lives. Okay, so now let's reflect on the activities that we just described and see how they fit into 3 attributes of culture. The core perspective, Steve got leadership buy-in and support so that he was not alone on his soapbox. Corporate philanthropy efforts reflected this must be important if we are willing to donate to it, and the willingness to put employee morale funds towards it. In our organization, we had a champion that was HR. Think about who in your organization can be a champion with you. It doesn't have to be HR, but it is important to be someone that is known within the company. The natural behavior change was reflected in the frequency of the training. This must be important if we are committing time to it every month, setting the stage at orientation for what the company expects, along with other core values, putting value in learning from mistakes versus punishment, resulting in employees were clicking fewer times on phishing emails. Accountability was reflected in the way managers began to track their employees' completion of the training and employees discussing the monthly training. You didn't want to be that employee who couldn't participate in the monthly cyber training water cooler talk. Having that culture or snowplow team will allow your reach to get further across the company, especially when you are a team of one. Using company culture as a way to embody cyber awareness results in now having others out championing your cause and an increased awareness by employees to incorporate cyber as part of their decision-making, thus reducing company risk and allowing you to focus on other areas of your job. I can't promise that a culture of cybersecurity will eliminate those dreadful clicks, but I can ensure it will greatly contribute to helping reduce those risks as employees begin to see this as part of who they are while working at your company.
So let's go back to the email incident that I mentioned at the very beginning of our presentation. You may notice now I'm calling it the first incident because, as many of you know, there's always more than one. So here's the email that I showed you earlier. I told you before that a request came in to change the routing number, to change the checking account number. What I didn't tell you is that that request was fulfilled and both of those were actually changed. Even with the initial training efforts that I had in place, that particular email had worked and those accounting numbers were changed. I wasn't notified about this email until one employee made one last attempt to verify by sending directly to me instead of just responding to that initial email to say, hey, are you really asking for this change? That's when I was notified. And how? Not only was I notified as the person not asking for a change of where my paycheck went, but I was also notified as the CISO. So it wasn't twice the fun, it was exponential fun. Getting to deal with it in both senses of what was going on. So my paycheck was on the line in both ways. The first step, of course, was immediately changing things back, no longer keeping those in there so I could still get my paycheck, and that worked out just fine. Nobody lost their paycheck, and in this whole story, nobody literally lost their paycheck. Things will turn out good. But Valerie and I looked at this, and we went ahead and did a root cause analysis to figure out exactly what went on and how we could prevent it in the future. And in my role, I looked at the technology as the CISO. Based on the capabilities that we had and the way we had them in place at the time, there was nothing different that we could have done with this particular email to change having it come into those employees.
And my analysis led me to conclude that the process in place would have prevented this from occurring, but the people involved had not followed it correctly. The employee asking about the change was by chance and not by design. They saw it was an executive and quickly jumped to response mode, completely ignoring the process we have in place for these types of changes. Thankfully, one employee had that afterthought and was brave enough to ask the question, was this really you that sent the request? Creating a culture of cybersecurity will reinforce with employees the importance of their cyber hygiene to keep both the company and customers' information safe. I take you back again to natural behaviors and accountability.
We addressed the people involved, and as you might imagine, during the incident and after, they were quite concerned. This is what it seemed like their faces were, both when they first told me this was going on and they realized it was a mistake, and later on when I had to call them back in and talk about it. It was an error, it was an executive, it was, they were worried about what the consequences were going to be, and they were very disappointed in themselves for making this error. Valerie handled the retraining part of this. She covered the process, made sure they understood what was going on and where they made their mistake. I reviewed the phishing email with them, just pointing out some very minor subtle cues that they may have picked up on to not respond to that particular email. But I think the most impactful was after this incident, talking about it with all the employees at an all hands meeting. I showed them, just like I did with you here, I showed them the email. They all had the same reactions. I'm looking at a room full of people with the same faces, what's up on the slide, the same dread, the same concern, because their fellow employees had made this mistake. So it resonated with them quite a bit. And I explained how we handled it, how we did the root cause analysis, how we addressed everything, and how we were going to talk about it in this room. We're not naming who it was, but we're pointing out that this occurred, it can occur, and we should all be vigilant for it. And that is when I could see the relief, the happiness that this wasn't a total stick approach. We were going to learn from this, covered the questions and concerns that people had, and that was it. We had all learned from this, and we moved on. So I continued in my CISO development program, getting the security strategy in place, collecting metrics, continuing to emphasize culture and the things I had learned from Valerie. And I had lots of metrics. Here's just some example dashboards, not calling out any particular vendor or anything. But the good news was, is I saw that usually within the first 2 weeks of the month, at least 90% of the employees, they were doing their training. And over a 9-month period, I saw with the phishing testing that we did, that it went from a click rate above 30% to well below 3% and sustaining there. So that was good to see. And the best part of that was that the repeat offenders weren't consistently repeating. They had learned, they were being more careful, and they weren't clicking over and over. I think the most important part of all of that is not just the metrics, but the feedback that I got as I watched things and I was a part of being around the headquarters and seeing how the company was learning. I could see attendance at my events going up. I saw that, and the employees would talk, again, that water cooler talk. They'd argue about the answer to the monthly quiz and if they liked it or they liked the story or not, what was being presented to them. I saw the executives in meetings competing with each other. If their team finished the training or did better than somebody else, they would be bragging back and forth. So that was great to see. I got compliments as a CISO. I got thank yous for the training and people who said, I really enjoyed it and I appreciate that you made this change. So that was something I think is very rare. But I'll tell you, the most telling feedback I got the entire time was the complete disappointment and the complete anger when I changed training platforms. When I went from one set of videos, quizzes, the characters, the stories, to another platform, which I thought was just as good, I got a bunch of unhappy employees. They did it. They didn't like the change, but I definitely got feedback there too. So vendors, if you want to know who it was I had before and after in those training platforms, happy to talk about it with you offline. But that was, again, great feedback that I got from there.
So we warned you, there's always more than one. Right after COVID lockdown began, we all shifted to telework. Like many organizations, we were primarily in the office, and the company had to quickly move to a 100% remote workforce. So there's a lot of churn going on, and there was an increase in phishing, as many of you probably experienced over this past year with this complete change in how we do business. There is a Contact Us Now button that was on the company's external website, and a former employee used that online form to request a copy of their W-4. The payroll department verified their identity by their name. However, most of the contact information on the form did not match what was in the HR system. Payroll reached out to the human resource department, and the HR rep for this story is the exact same employee who was involved in the earlier incident. This employee contacted that former employee, verified their new contact information by asking some verifying PII information, and confirmed that this was a valid request for the W-4. The process continued where the IT department helped with encrypting the email. There was an executive who heard about the situation and sent an email praising the employees involved on their cyber awareness. Talk about creating natural behaviors, very nice and smooth. Now, this is a short summary of what occurred. Since you can imagine, there are quite a few steps in the process to verify an employee, especially one who's left. But this was over a year later from that previous incident, and it was still on that HR person's line. It had an impact, and we're sure the outcome of how Steve and I handled it were part of making that impact a positive one. While small, I think this is a great example of resilience and how our approach encourages it. It was memorable, positive impact that enables the employee to remember and correctly apply those lessons at a later date.
So I noted up front that we want you to learn from our experience. We want you to prevent this from happening, or worst case, minimize the impact if something like this ever does. So the way that we think you should approach this is initially just think about how this applies to you and your situation. You're going to sit here this week at RSA. You're going to have lots of presentations, tons of slides to look at. You're going to take a lot of notes, have a whole bunch of great ideas coming out, but take the time to sit down and reflect on how this would work in your particular situation. This is equally applicable if you're on the security side of the house, CISO, IT director, whatever your role is, as well as if you're not on the security side, but you're listening and you're pulling lessons out of what we're talking about here, and you want to take those back and try to apply them. Think about where do you put people? How do you think about them? Do you believe our premise of putting people first in the way that we've described it? What is your corporate culture? Do you have one? And is it mature enough for you to continue building on it and leveraging that to your advantage? And I think you should ask your chief of HR out to get a coffee. That worked very well for me. But again, don't be afraid if you're not the CISO, you're not on the security side, asking them out, sit down, have a coffee, have a talk with them, let them know the ideas and things you learned here and where you think it might be useful for them. Next, as you get your thoughts together, develop your plan of what's next. How are you going to make this happen? You've got a lot of projects, or your security team has a lot of projects. How are you going to fit all of this in? So this is where you need to be able to talk to your team. If you're at the executive level, it's your boss above you, it's your fellow executives, as well as your teams below you, your individual teams, or even at a manager team level. You can talk up to the executives, across to your peers, and within your own team from there to get their thoughts and ideas on what you're proposing and how you think it could be a benefit for everyone. And along the way, gather evidence. It makes for a very compelling argument if you can show an actual email that comes into your company that people see this really happens, this really is part of what I need to worry about, to keep that on the forefront of their mind. And then finally, start doing what you planned. Conduct training. See if there is a better platform out there. If you don't have one, potentially acquiring a platform, updating your policies. Think about how this is all applicable in this new remote work paradigm that we're still dealing with even today. And then look for opportunities to go out and teach, whether it's within your own team, if it's a quarterly and all hands, whatever that capability is, and to continue educating your employees. And most importantly, repeat. You're going to have new employees coming in all the time that need to hear this. You're going to have old employees that are staying there that need that refresher so they don't get in a rut and forget about things, and it keeps security on their mind.
Let me emphasize the importance of repeating these activities using a common phrase regarding culture and strategy that you may have heard before. There are a variety of comments about the relationship between culture and strategy. Generally, they note how culture is more important than strategy when it comes to making changes that last. I think we can all agree that these phrases hold true. Therefore, culture plays a large role as you try to establish positive, lasting changes with your employees' security behaviors. Applying the framework that I offer regarding core, natural, and accountable, you can create your own snowplow team. And with that, we'd like to thank you for your time and attention to our presentation.